Namaskar, Nileshok here. I am bringing you a breaking update from the field of ancient Indian history. This is a recent paper. It was published sometime in August of 2020. And at that time, I did write a brief note and circulate it through social media. But something else, something that was not captured or discussed in that research paper was recently discussed by one of the authors of that paper, Professor S.M. Ramaswamy. And that has brought so many new things to light. Specifically, I would like to discuss the relevance of that particular paper, this particular finding, for the flooding and destruction of Dwarka in 5525 BCE. So we are referring to Krishna's Dwarka, the flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka. Because as you may know, Dwarka, or as it was known before, the place called Kushasthali, it is existing for thousands and thousands of years, going back to close to 30,000 years based on available evidence. But as far as the Mahabharata time is concerned and Krishna's Dwarka and its destruction, my research work has shown that it happened in 5525 BCE. So what is the breaking news? Well, let me start sharing my PowerPoint here. That kind of gives you the anchor to all of us. All right, so this is breaking update, ancient in Hindu history, and in this series you can call this a first episode. All right, so this is the article. Okay, it was published, as I said, in August 2020 in the Current Science. The paper title was Detection of Submerged Harbor Using the Different Sensing, Remote Sensing Techniques in the offshore region of ancient port city, Pumpuhar, and I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, in southern India. It is in Tamil Nadu and very close to Chidambaram, okay, the famous place known for the Nataraj Mandir. All right, so recently the presentation was given by Professor S.M. Ramaswamy. It is a brilliant presentation. It is available in YouTube, and I would encourage you to watch the original presentation. The specific portion I am going to discuss, which is in the context of the flooding and destruction of Dwarka in 5525 BCE. This is not something Professor Somasundar or Ramaswamy has discussed. Okay, this is, I'm just pulling certain data and his inferences, his interpretation, and I'm going to show how it beautifully corroborates with the existing evidence for the flooding and destruction of Dwarka in 5525 BCE from around the world, which I have already discussed in multiple places. But just to keep this material in one place, and to those of you who would want to know the context, I am going to quickly go through the evidence that I have discussed in the past. Okay, so oceanography evidence and what we see around the world is a sudden sea level rise in mid 6th millennium BCE. It's important to understand that since the LGM, the last glacial maximum that occurred around, we are going to talk of the approximate time period, but occurred around say 30,000, 25,000 years ago to say 20,000 years ago. Since then, the ocean level is always increasing. However, there are these specific episodes where there is a sudden and abrupt rise in the sea levels. Okay, and that's the one I'm referring to. So Just to bring you back in terms of how much evidence already exists in support of the date of 5525 BCE for the flooding and destruction of Dwarka. Where do we begin? Well, I began with the internal evidence of the Mahabharata text. I extracted every single astronomy description, astronomy evidence from the Mahabharata text that amounts to more than 300 plus specific pieces of evidence. Then I put them together the way we solve a crossword puzzle, the way we solve a jigsaw puzzle, of course, in an empirical scientific fashion, testing every single piece of evidence in an objective fashion. And that led me to 5561 BCE as the year of Mahabharat war. Now, the same Mahabharata text refers to the flooding and destruction of Dwarka 36 years after the Mahabharat war. So if we take that 5561 BCE as the year of Mahabharat war, add 36 years to it, we arrive at 5525 BCE. Okay, remember, we are going before Common Era. So 5525 BCE is after 5561 BCE on a time scale. So how do we use this evidence, or how do we use this claim to test additional evidence? Okay, we use the logic of scientific discovery or scientific method. In this case, based on independent evidence, which is what? Astronomy evidence, more than 300 plus from Mahabharata text, has given us the year of Mahabharat war. Then another chronological evidence from the Mahabharata text has given us ability to estimate the timing of the flooding and destruction of Dwarka by simply adding those 36 years to 5561 BCE. That takes us to 5525 BCE. So now, if we are looking for additional evidence, additional corroborative evidence beyond the astronomy evidence, we are going to, in this case, start not with the evidence, but we are going to start with the claim, with the inference that the flooding and destruction of Dwarka occurred in 5525 BCE. Once we state that, now you can almost think of this as a claim, or as a, in a Nyaya Darshana speak, as a pratidnya. Now the question is, do we have additional evidence in support of that statement? Okay, and is it objectively testable? Now we have to formulate a statement of a theory, but of course we don't know how to formulate that statement until we know what kind of evidence we are looking at. And here we are going to look at the evidence from astronomy, chronology, and oceanography. In fact, I already made use of the astronomy evidence and also the chronology evidence to arrive at 5525 BC. So we are done with that as far as this particular this particular issue is concerned, the flooding and destruction of Dwarka. Okay, now we are going to look at the oceanography evidence. Now, what could be, would be, or should be the theory as we relate to the oceanography evidence? The theory would say, if a significant event took place, such as say flooding and destruction of Dwarka, the geological records, oceanography records, possibly climatology records, may tend to preserve the evidence related to that incident. Okay, so now if you want to remove that may, then we would say geology, or the geology, we can call it as a broad name, that we will include oceanography and seismology and morphology and climatology and all that evidence into one. We will say the geology evidence tends to preserve the signature of the past significant events. Now, this is our assumption. We are hoping that the flooding and destruction of Dwarka was a significant geological event. We know it was a significant historical event, but we don't know if it was a significant geological event. It may be, it may not be. And even if it was a significant event, uh, the geological data, I mean, might be preserved in it or it may not be preserved. It is something that we must understand, that as a researcher of history, we are like beggars, and beggars cannot be choosy. We can only work with the evidence that we have. Okay. All right. So let's move further. So based on the evidence that I have already presented, and I'm going to quickly go through that evidence, one may accept it. One may accept 5525 BCE as the year for the flooding and destruction of Dwarka, just purely based on a Shraddha, okay, without going into the details of my research. And that's a good start. But I do not want anyone to stop there, okay? In fact, a Vijnana Buddhi mindset demands that you don't stop there. There is a lot of objectively testable empirical evidence, okay? You can go through that evidence, try to validate yourself and see if it makes sense, okay? Then there is a logical way how people draw the inferences from the data. You can look at that and see if there is any problem, then any faults that you can find with my logic. Okay, that's the descriptions of the evidence and how we connect the dots. The third one, most important, and that this is very relevant for our today's discussion, is that a revolutionary theory, a revolutionary claim, it brings out many new predictions. And as the new evidence piles up, it provides us an opportunity to take that evidence and see if it connects with the new predictions made based on that new theory, new claim. Okay. All right. So this is the litmus test of a revolutionary claim. It is a litmus test of a revolutionary theory. Okay. So I'll quickly complete this cube here. And in summary, I would say my claims for the year of Mahabharat war, 5561 BC, or for the year of Ram Ravan Yuddha, 12,209 BCE, I'm asserting that they fall in the top right-hand corner, very high on objectively empirically testable evidence, very high on a logical inferencing, and very high on the characteristics of a revolutionary theory, revolutionary claim, okay, based on their ability to make many new predictions. And frankly, new prediction itself is a great deal, because many claims, you will notice, don't make any new predictions. But that is not sufficient. What we would ideally like to see is that many of these new predictions, or at least some of these new predictions, actually come out to be true. Okay, and that's what we're going to look at. That has already happened to the claim of flooding and destruction of Dwarka in 5525 BCE. I'm going to show that evidence. But then what I am really saying here is that this new evidence that Professor Somasundar presented just a few days ago, or at least on YouTube, it came out just a few days ago, it beautifully corroborates this claim of 5525 BC. So the point is, you can take somebody's claim. You should never take it blindly, although initially you should have a shraddha, reverence, trust, conviction that it is correct, even in order to spend some time entertaining that claim to see even whether that makes sense. Otherwise, if you just upfront feel that this is not worth wasting your time, then don't waste your time. Just move on. There are so many things in life to do. But if somebody decides to invest the time, then of course they should study it deeply and be convinced. That's what I call swadhyaya plus use of intellect. Then someone may go one step further and critique it brutally and logically. In science, we are not looking for absolute truths, or actually we are looking for absolute truths, but science tells us, the way the science works, even if we reach the absolute truth, we will not know that we have reached the truth. So what does that mean? That means we are always looking at the best approximation to the truth. And as Richard Feynman nicely puts it, science is all about more likely versus less likely scenarios, and then selecting the more likely scenario in the presence of all the available evidence. Okay, so we always have a room to critique even the best claim and find out the gaps, and that leads to the next revolution. Okay, now you may be successful and lucky just the way I was in determining the date of Mahabharat war or the date of Ramayana, that you may able to present an alternate and a superior claim in comparison to everyone else who has done whatever they have done in solving that specific problem. Okay. Now the fifth one, my favorite, I'm saying, but many people are so lazy that they don't want to do any of this. Okay. They shouldn't waste any good researcher's time. They should take a hike. Okay. Samshayatma Avinashiti is what Bhagavad Gita says. The samshay is of a two kinds, samshay of a mind, samshay of a buddhi. Here, Krishna is referring to samshay of a mind that leads to a destruction, because this is the kind of a lazy samshay. I don't agree, I don't like it, I'm not convinced. No, that has no value. If you're not convinced, if you don't like it, if you disagree, do something about it. Explain why you disagree. Give us a better claim. Just purely criticizing something has no value as far as Nyaya Darshana is concerned. That is called vitanda. Many people don't get that. Nyaya Darshana says, so pratipaksha sthapana hi no vitanda. Unless you have a alternate claim that you are willing to put forward, willing to defend with evidence, but you are still trying to just criticize some other person's claim based on the limitations of that claim, you are doing vitanda. All right, let's move on. So what we have here is 5525 BCE as the claim for flooding and destruction of Dwarka, purely based on the astronomy evidence of Mahabharata text plus the chronology descriptions of the Mahabharata text, taking us to 5525 BCE. All right. Now, is there a oceanography evidence? Is there a geography evidence around the world? Now, this is something I have shared many times. I'm going to go a bit fast through this. There is oceanography evidence around the globe. In fact, I have collected back in 2016 or so, I had collected close to 50 papers, research papers. Uh, in another year, like by 2017, I collected additional 50 papers. And I'm sure I don't even keep track of a number. I don't know how to even number them. But just is it simple to say that there are 100 plus different research papers who sometimes directly, sometimes very obviously, other times indirectly points to this particular time frame where something, as far as the ocean levels and ocean data is concerned, something significant happened. Okay, we're not talking of some comet hitting the earth. I mean, I'm not going into the root cause what it happened even in this discussion, but something happened because the outcome evidence is very visible. And as it relates to the specific uh, subject of discussion, I'm going to pull three specific pieces of evidence from around the world. Okay, we'll start in the Caribbean, in the Barbados. This individual, Paul Blanchon, who also happened to study, uh, do his PhD in geology at University of Alberta, the same place where I did my master's in chemical engineering. And as it happens, exactly almost at the same time. Of course, I did not know him. I did not know that he was working on this. And I had, by that time, not figured out the demystification of Arundhati Vasishtha observation. So I didn't have a specific date for Mahabharata. So there was no question of, we even if we knew each other, we wouldn't have known that there were these loose threads. They were going to bring us together. What he did, uh, he started with Barbados, but then he looked at 7 different locations in the Caribbean area. And this is what he found. Again, let's go back to the ocean levels, sea levels increasing over last 20,000 years or so. That's exactly what this graph is. If you look from the right side, what you see, if you draw a smooth line, you will see that the ocean level essentially going up all the way to our times very smoothly. Okay, how much up? About 120 to 140 meters. That's what it has come up in last 20,000 years. However, do notice there are these in between pockets. They are known as CRE, catastrophic rise events, where there is a sudden sea level rise. And the one that's relevant to us for today's discussion is this CRE3. Okay, that is, there was in this Caribbean area, uh, evidence shows us that there was a significant sudden rise of sea level, 6.5 meters plus minus 2.5 meters. And when 7.6 K, that's 7600 before present, that's 5600 BCE. And as most of the study, scientific study with empirical data, you would know, it always has a standard error bracket. That's 130 years, plus minus 130 years. So 5600 BC plus minus 130 years. That's just a notice that the 5525 BCE, the year of flooding and destruction of Dwarka, falls right between this. That's our evidence number one. Let's go to evidence number two. We come to the border of Europe and Asia, that is Istanbul in Turkey. If you have been to Istanbul again, this is the Mediterranean Sea coming from the northwest side here in the picture. Then that turns into Aegean Sea, that turns into Sea of Marmara. And then if you cross this Bosphorus channel, then the other side is the Black Sea. If you go back in antiquity, just go back thousands of years, you'll find that the Black Sea was not a Black Sea. It was a sweetwater lake, and many rivers were coming from the northern portion and feeding into it. Something happened suddenly. Again, after some time, you will not have a surprise as to what that was. Ocean level rose. The water from the world's oceans went into Mediterranean. Mediterranean sea level went up. It had effect on the Aegean Sea. Further, it had effect on the Sea of Marmara. At some point, that pressure of the seawater broke through the Bosphorus channel and started pouring on the other side. It was a simple, small, very small sweetwater lake. So actually, instantaneously, so to say, practically instantaneously, this sweetwater lake turned into a brackish saltwater sea. That is what we call now the Black Sea. And lo and behold, what is the timing of this Black Sea becoming a Black Sea as we know today, the saltwater sea? This is work of Ryan and Pittman from Columbia University, two geologists. They have shown with the help of how many? 9 plus parameters, that this happened in a very short period of time, geologically speaking, instantaneously. And it happened around 5550 BCE. And again, the standard error is very small, 5550 BCE plus minus 50 years, let's say. Again, notice that 5525 BCE falls within that range. This is evidence number two. Let's come to evidence number three. Now, this is very important. I mean, not that the previous two are not important. They just show you a consistent picture. In fact, there is evidence from around the world that I'm not going to discuss today. If you go to the east coast of Maine, okay, that is in United States, you can see similar evidence, okay, not as uh, distinct, as clear as what I showed you. If you go to Australia, there was a recent paper in last 2 years that talked about a sudden sea level rise in somewhere in the Australia area around that 7,000 years ago, which again goes back to the 6th millennium BCE. Okay, but let's come to this area of the Arabian Sea or Sindhu Sagar. Again, that's where the Dwarka is. So our modern day Dwarka, where if you visit Dwarka and Krishna Mandir, this is at this tip here called Bet Dwarka. All right, now Krishna's Dwarka is already inside the sea. Okay, it's not on the land. And we will see approximate location for Krishna's Dwarka. But before we go there, this is the area we are looking at. And again, the oceanography data. This is like 30 plus different studies, okay, done over last 50 plus years. And out of those, some of the very key studies, They combined like 5 to 7 studies, and that is producing the graph that you see on the left side. What are you seeing here? The x-axis is the time axis. At the top, if you see, this is our time, 2000 CE, so to say. We are going backwards to 1000 CE and then 0. That's the start of a Gregorian calendar, assumed start of a Gregorian calendar, arbitrary set start of a Gregorian calendar. If you go further back, then now we are going into negative years, or you can call BCE, 1000, 2000, 3000, 4000, 5000, 6000, and so on. What I want you to notice, to keep consistent with what we saw in Barbados or Caribbean, also with the Turkey, what do you see in the Arabian Sea? And therefore, in the entire Arabian area, it would have affected in a slightly different fashion. That's why we have these different graphs. But my point is, the Dwarka is affected by this type of ocean behavior. In 6th millennium BC, in fact, middle of the 6th millennium BC, which is again 5525 BCE, there was a sudden surge of ocean level, sea level, of about 15 meters, okay, in the 6th millennium BCE. And as the data shows us, in the continuing 5th millennium BCE, as if there was an additional 8 meters, a total of 23 meters. Okay, now this is based on the data. We don't know exactly how much happened at any specific time, or was it just a one time it happened. And sometimes the lingering effects can take time, and the lingering effects will have a different type of effect. And so when the data is collected, it may appear as if the things happen later or things happen earlier. Okay, that's the nature of data. If you are into research of this kind of data, I don't mean just geology, in general, you'll be very familiar with it. If you are not familiar, then you should take this on a shraddha, that's what exactly happens. Just remember this graph, okay? Because we are going to relate this with what the new research that came out just a few days ago. So the highest level of the sea, okay, that was attained at the end of this sudden sea level rise, actually the water went 3 meters above the current sea level. Okay, so a lot of the land area was flooded, and it stayed that way for a long time. In fact, how long? So let's take, for example, it goes here, so that's say 5000 or 4000 BCE. Okay, and then it was steady there up to almost like 2000 BC. But you can also notice some other data points actually showing upheaval, like, so actually it's going down, there is a receding of the sea and so on. But also in some places there is that as if it is stayed there until say 3000 or 2000 BCE. And then definitely it went down, okay, went through its own oscillations and finally settled to where it is today. Let's keep that in mind. One more point, I'll bring it to your attention. We'll not discuss it here, but something that I need to uh, bring it out, so that when we discuss some other relevant subject as it relates to our Hindu history, we can bring that point up. I can refer to this video, for example, which is to say, as the sea level rose, notice what is happening to the sea bottom platform or sea platform, submarine platform. This is a very well-known phenomenon. It can happen to a different extent, different magnitude, but actually even the sea level moves. So the bottom of the sea in that area also moves, maybe because of accumulation and whatnot. We'll not go into the causes again, but that submarine platform, after this water surge came, actually went from here, and actually it came up by about 15 meters or whatever that length is, okay? So I just want you to note it down. Okay, so I already said what I wanted to say. Now comes the breaking update. I'm going to show you the corroborative evidence from this recent research study from the east coast of India, and how that marvelously corroborates with the 5525 BC flooding and destruction of Dwarka. Okay, so just repeating that. So this is